What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hartness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Jacques, the party scientist, and we speak about how to create engaging and meaningful events that bring colleagues together without alcohol. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download my free one-page summary. And now, enjoy. Jacques, the party scientist, welcome back.
It's nice to be back in your presence, Miriam. I really look up to you as a social risk taker and community builder. I think we share that in common. So let's really shake this podcast up, hey?
Ooh, I am looking forward as I was attending the closing party of the Never Done Before festival, second closing party that we did together. And each time that I see you host such a session, I see the transformation in the participants. Everyone joins, and after, everyone wonders, how did he make me do that? Did I really just stand up and danced in front of people I didn't know? So let me ask you the simple question, Jacques. How do you do that? What is this party science about? And maybe we can start with your philosophy for those who haven't listened to our first conversation.
I love that question. I have a very detailed philosophy for life, like living a good life, and also about what makes an incredible, memorable, impactful event. And that could be a workshop, that could be a dinner party that you're hosting. But what was coming up when you shared that and the memory of the closing party, I really, initially, when I started leading virtual experiences, I thought it was impossible to reach these states of liberation and connection and unity. Like, these are physiological states that I'm trying to create when I'm designing experiences and leading them. And initially, I thought it was impossible to do that. But every time that we collaborate, I feel, for a variety of reasons, one of which is the open-mindedness of your community. The second of which is my willingness to take risks and experiment and participate wholeheartedly first. Like, I'm leading with full excitement and full engagement first. And then I have, individuals like you there's an element of faith. There's an element like, oh, let's try this and see where it goes. Like, I'm going to participate fully. But what's coming to mind is the social pressure and the positive effects of social pressure and the negative effects of social pressure. And when we're facilitating, we're using social pressure to help people reach their goals. And I think that we shouldn't just throw out this idea of social pressure. And so, to answer your question about the closing party, it's about leveraging the group and creating this group permission and this group psychological safety, such that people are like, oh, like, everyone else is doing it. Like, I want to participate. And to an extent, they don't want to be the party pooper. And so it facilitates that risk taking. And that's one of the positive effects of social pressure.
It's a good way of putting it. And yes, I think the community is open-minded. And I think what you mentioned after is that your full blunt honesty and authenticity and leaning in and taking all the risk makes a big difference. And I wonder how you would do it in other contexts, inviting the air quotes right people to jump in first with you. Because I realized you invited me to come on stage, and then you invited one of the rather senior other participants. I think it was John Chen. And then we're dancing in front of everyone. And then obviously nobody wants to be the party pooper. If the founder and the most senior person already said hell yes.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're not suggesting that facilitators call people out on being the party pooper. Although that would be intriguing to see what happened. I love that you point that out. And I think this is just the importance of having a team when we facilitate and like, yes, the party scientist can create that on his own. Like I can dance and kind of spread the vibe to everyone else in the room. But then when more people are present, following the activity, participating fully, what it does, it creates this phenomenon of social proof. And when more people are doing something, it just lessens the risk for everyone else to do it. And this idea of like lessening the risk is central to my philosophy, and in a variety of contexts, I'm always thinking about that. How can I lessen the risk? How can I create an experience where people feel like they're in control and they can always choose not to participate, and they can participate in however they want. Like if they want to sit, if they want to just watch. I used to be more of a pushy facilitator. Like I used to have this quote while I was throwing street parades and, guiding strangers in the streets. So I'd get strangers to hold hands, bear hug, do conga lines, line dance. Then I'd finish with an open mic where strangers would come in and just share like, it's the best night of my life. And then all these other strangers would like, cheer, and no one knows each other. I used to facilitate engagement. I would say, if you spend your life watching, you will accomplish nothing. And that's really like calling people out.
Mm-hmm.
And now what I'm like, we're going to start with this. And at any point, if you just want to watch, you can leave. You can choose not to participate. But my guarantee is that you're going to be grateful that you participated by the end of this, and you're going to be so happy, and you're going to feel different, and you're going to make new friends, and you're going to feel a sense of belonging, of vitality.
Interesting shift. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You made the shift and it feels much more inviting. And do you have the impression that more people now are actually actively participating since you do that? Since you are more open to accept a no?
Yeah, gosh. I can't wait to start really collecting data on my experiences. And John Chen and I were actually chatting about this, how eventually you and I as facilitators will have like live data on engagement, and we will be able to adjust our facilitation in the moment to increase engagement. And what I dreamt of long ago was like a wristband where I would get data on people's emotional state. And so I'd have like an average emotional state. And I mean, the principle here is just being aware of our participants and their sense of comfort. I just really adjust to the group. So I think that with a community like Never Done Before, they might be more open to like me, stating commands with this implicit rule that, you can do whatever you want. With a community that is not willing to just stand up and dance, I would take much of the consensual, gentle approach, and I'd really adjust my persona. Like for a lot of people, I'm just too much. Like I just get way too excited. And when I'm in conversation with people, and this is something I'm also really interested in, is how do we create these moments of emotional synchrony when we're connecting with another person. And so what I've done is I get really sensitive to another person's emotions. And so I get really excited, and people find me to be too much. For some people, that causes them to distance themselves from me. But for others, it's contagious and it leads them to be more excited. So the point here is, at times, I will make the decision to push my participants and really encourage people to be more courageous.
Mm-hmm.
Like the highest version of oneself will be courageous and would be willing to try this out. And I will kind of emphasize that. I'll try to get people on this different frame of mind where they're really asking themselves, well, like, what's the worst that could happen? Is this good for me? Like embracing this discomfort. At other times, I'm just much more passive, and I just kind of wait for engagement to gradually increase.
Thank you for sharing so openly that for some you're too much. And I think it's great because why am I saying that? That if you're so particular that there will be some who dislike your style, this also means that some would really like your style. And then it might be easier for you to find your clients because, yes, it might not be for everyone, but for those who do want to go there, then you found your crowd, which also makes it easier. And I think that's something that many facilitators who might not be in the extreme facilitation as you are, this is actually a good reminder that facilitators, we very often all do the same things. We run activities to help groups leverage their power, help them to find solutions whatsoever. And we forget that it's also our energy and our personality that has an impact and with which we might find the right or the wrong clients. It's a differentiator.
I love what you're bringing up here, Miriam. And I talk a lot about this idea of the pro-social state and how contagious the facilitator's moment-to-moment physiological state is. And I think that I may have overestimated, I may have over-exaggerated like techniques and, rhetoric as a facilitator and underestimated just my state and my personality and my authenticity. I think that is so important to psychological safety and to the spread of emotions in a group. And this, concept of the physiological state of the facilitator, I've been working on this, nervous system regulation, throughout my life. And I'm returning from a silent meditation retreat. And this is my first day back in reality. And experiences like this have led me to become less reactive to disengagement or rejection or people's misery. This is one of the words that the Buddha uses quite often. Is a lot of people have some negativity and misery, and then that may come up in our sessions when we're facilitating, and especially when we're like inviting people to be happy and be silly and kind of take themselves lightly. For a lot of people, that will trigger negativity.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to take this back to what you were just saying. My vibe attracts a certain crowd. And I used to really subscribe to that. And I used to facilitate at festivals. I used to go on the main stages of these conscious festivals. And I realized that demographic actually isn't served by me. They're already at a certain level. And so I've started to move toward demographics who find me to be too much and may not be receptive to my methods. And I've started to really help the people that never have been introduced to these modalities of human connection. And so that's one of the factors in, focusing more on corporate belonging instead of, going out and being the party scientists and just throwing parties for people who party and people who have that joy and fun within them. Like, I want to impact mainstream social norms, not these other communities that are very light already.
So when I understand you correctly, instead of going towards the lower hanging fruit, you're now trying to reach those who actually would really benefit from your services, and you're looking for corporates, which sounds so Jacques. And what you said before we hit the record button was that you shared your experience of getting out to reach out to so many people that you get very used to being rejected. And I would love to come back to that and to your learnings from that. I think it's admirable, and I think there's a lot we can learn. Before that, I just want to share one reflection, because knowing your work and having participated in your sessions, what I find admirable, and that's why it makes sense, is that you get participants to a stage of engagement and uplifted energy without any substances and without being in the same physical space together. So I can see the opportunity for actually corporate events on how to bring their people together and to create engagement and corporate fun for much less investment.
Yeah. I joke around that I've never spent money on alcohol in my life. So I saved a lot of money when I was young. So I kind of relate. I'm like, oh, I'm financially healthy because I didn't spend any money on alcohol during my youth. I think this is so important. And I want to emphasize that alcohol is an art form, and it does create social trust so rapidly. And that is the evolutionary hypothesis around alcohol, is it really facilitates social trust so that humans can cooperate. And if you as a facilitator are trying to create social trust in your group so that learning outcomes are achieved more quickly, so that the information retention is higher, so that people perform at a higher level and are more productive, all these really important metrics that we care about, even just how much someone recommends our session, all these are related to positive emotions. And so positive emotions, I really see positive emotions as this fertile soil for all these other learning outcomes and metrics. And then, of course, positive emotions and social trust are very closely related. The question I'm really excited about nowadays, and I just published an article about this, is the science of social bonding. And what are all the alternative approaches to, when we design an event and we serve alcohol, what is the purpose of alcohol? What is the actual objective of people drinking alcohol? And for a lot of people, it's I want to lighten the vibe. I want to create connections among my guests. And I want people to feel authentic, and I don't want them to feel self-conscious. I just think there's so many methods that I was leaving on the table that a lot of event organizers that I meet are leaving on the table. These methods are much more effective than alcohol at creating this sense of social trust, which amplifies engagement, focus, performance, retention, so many of these factors. So yeah, partying to me, and coming back to your question about what is my philosophy, my philosophy is really that the quality of our relationships and our connections, that predicts the quality of our life. And that is so important to me, and educating people on this really practical, science-based insight, our relationships, our connections, it's worth training. It's worth training ourselves to not only have really meaningful, deep one-on-one connections, but how can we create those connections in groups? Because that's my greatest high, right? My greatest high is seeing people come alive, right? How often do people fully come alive? And there's no inner monologue. There's no, oh my gosh, people are perceiving me as childish, right? That's what's really exciting for me. And I think you really understand this, Miriam. And yeah, I think this is where we really align.
Thank you. And I'd be curious in two things. One is, how do you turn the switch? So where someone truly becomes alive? Is it a process or is it a moment? Is it something that you really have something like a switch? Like, okay, now they're ready. Turn this one. And where do you find inspiration for creating these sessions?
Yeah, I love this idea of the switch. And when I was at this meditation retreat, I was sharing this analogy I have for my mind. And my mind is like a switchboard, and I'll switch traits on and off. And I'm continually, increasing the number of switches on this switchboard. So sometimes I will withdraw a little, and I will let my shoulders drop, and I will take a step back and become more calm in a connection. That's a switch. One switch is I will remind myself of certain memories when I feel a lot of fear. That's kind of a switch that I can activate so that I can take the risk and be courageous. Yeah. So this is aliveness. What is aliveness, and how do we activate that? And I love that you asked this question of the switch, because certainly there are certain activities that are really energizing that can create that aliveness. And the moments where I've seen people come alive have been in playful environments. So it's not even that people are dancing or singing. There's like this playful element, and it's much more engaging than what you'd see at a concert or in a lecture hall, where people are really engaged or absorbed by a presentation. What's happening in a state of aliveness is it's a very subjective experience, but what I notice in my participants is there's like a high physical energy. There's a lot of movement, and the body is opening up. And a lot of the times, and this is one practical takeaway, if you just like go like this, jump up and down with like
your arms up,
with your arms up, and like I do this with participants. If you just do that for like 60 seconds, like I will change my physiological state, and I will notice a change in my group. So when people are doing that, I know that aliveness is almost there. Now, I think it's just a very natural, gradual process, and it's about taking gradual social risks until a group is in that pro-social state. Once there are positive emotions flowing, people are energized, engaged, they're fully participating, they've noticed the effects on their body in the session, so they're willing to trust me as a facilitator and engage in the riskiest exercises that I will lead are ones involving improv, like interactive improv and playfulness. And like I have one exercise that I've led successfully on various occasions where I get everyone on one knee, and everyone's on one knee in a room, and then you make eye contact with someone across the space. And then you put on the Star Wars battle song, and you have everyone imagine that they're now like having a lightsaber battle. And so you get everyone to like hold their lightsaber in the air dramatically. And then, the facilitator cues the start of the battle. And so people are using the force and like rolling around on the ground, and everyone's just in these moments of laughter and then like serious improv, and it just switches on and off. So just sharing that, it's makes me feel, a lot of lightness.
Yes. And
yeah. How about you? Like, are you activating this aliveness in your sessions? And if so, when do you know a group is ready to kind of embrace this state?
I think my sessions are rather brainy instead of physical. So it's more like the connection through speaking and sharing and being in small group conversations. And I think the way both of us create a sense of safety is through our authenticity and going first. So putting the masks aside, just being ourselves, not trying to be this perfect or this certain person. And what I noticed right now while you explained what you're doing and reflecting back is that you often start with a physical activity that is almost sporty and that has very little risk. So jumping, assuming that you're in the physical state that you can jump. If you can, everyone can, right? It's not asking someone to do a fancy dance move. And I remember what you also often do is to start with a kind of fight move, so boxing move. So something that is slightly silly, but it's still physical activity that everyone then copies so that everyone gets into, everyone warms up. Everyone gets physically active. And then it's maybe just a natural process to feel alive because we basically are when we're exercising.
Yeah. That's definitely a part of my philosophy and framework. And I think that thinking of the workshop we lead as a flow of physical energy is a really important perspective. And I think that we can really transform engagement in a space just by elevating people's heart rates and increasing their body temperature. And so I think that the practicality here is that it doesn't require dance. It doesn't require these wild playfulness exercises to increase the mental focus and sense of connection in the room. And the reason why I say sense of connection is because when people move in synchrony to music, it activates social trust neurotransmitters. So there's research on mirroring, exactly. And so when we move in synchrony, even if it's just jumping up and down with our body posture open, this can lead to a sense of unity. And it's not based on the brainy aspect. It's based on like an underlying layer, which came before we had the ability to use language. And, party science, and what I'm really interested in is like, what can we do aside from language to create social bonds? But I'd love to pause and, we're speaking about aliveness and we're speaking about playfulness, physical energy, music. And I'm curious, like, how do you leverage all of this in your brainier workshops where people are learning skills and it may be more academic, it's a learning experience. What's your philosophy for incorporating these aspects into the experience?
Interestingly, I think my workshops are the least academic. And maybe that's because my academic life is somewhere in the past. So I really am an extreme facilitator in the sense that I trust that the group has everything. They know everything they need to know. And it's my job to help them bring that out by asking the right questions and giving them the opportunities to share with each other so that they don't need my academic input. How I use music and the aspects that you described to increase body temperature and aliveness, I use more and more music in my workshops. So when participants arrive, I play music. When they come back from a breakout room, I play music. And I am still not perfect in finding the right music for the right atmosphere and emotional state I want to have them. But I think I'm coming close. And I realize from time to time that I want to experiment more on that. And what I do with smaller groups is stretching check-ins, actually. And this works really well. So someone starts a stretch and everyone follows and does the same stretch. And while doing that, we just check in what's on our mind right now, which is also the mirroring and the synchronicity and just getting off the chair and moving our body parts.
I love that. And coming back to low risk activities like stretching, and when I'm leading a stretch break, I'm always trying to open up the body posture, because posture and our state of focus and a state of energy and mood are actually closely related. And I just want to emphasize what you've shared with music. Music and the activation of memories are really related, like music and the activation of mood. And so, for a lot of people, music and singing and dance and movement, and we're going to do a meditation to a really, grounding nature song. Like, for a lot of people, that's just way too much. But we can still have a dramatic impact on the mood in a room just by playing a song at like, I've played this song like 400 times. And it's just, I mean, maybe it's just my memory activation because it's all subjective. I mean, and that's that's the cultural aspect of music, right? And so when we're leveraging music, being aware of the kind of cultural heritage of our group. And if we play a song that's just really central to someone's culture, they feel like, the experience is customized for them, and, they're much more willing to kind of lighten up, right? So I just want to emphasize that even if it's just playing a song that activates certain memories for someone, that can have a dramatic impact. And I'm the party scientist, so I have like 400 playlists, right? Music to me is one of these incredible accelerators of social bonding, and being really particular about what music we choose is super, super important. And I'll share one last song, and I play this at the end of a lot of my sessions, and it's pretty universally known. It's this song, right? Oh, like, it's very effective. It's very effective, and it's almost culturally universal. Like, people understand this song, and it lightens them up, and it's like, wow, it's time to experience some gratitude. And again, I mean, I don't have data. So that, like, I observe people participating, but do I have data on how it actually impacts their mood? Like, that's the next step of party science is like live physiological data. Like facilitation and like biohacking merging together.
And it's interesting because I mean, this is a very kind of Christian inspired song. So it's clearly attached to a certain cultural background. And still, I think from the way it is composed, this uplifting, it does have an effect on the listener. And I loved what you said, to be intentional on the music related to our audience. That if they are coming from a different cultural background, how can we show the extra level of care by maybe finding an artist from their region? I wrote that down. I will definitely remember that, because I think it's such a small gesture with very big impact. And I think that's what it's all about. So how do you choose your music for the sessions?
Yeah. So having led thousands of dance parties across 15 countries, there are certain songs that I have very high confidence in. However, I'm always experimenting. I'm always expanding the toolkit. I have a playlist containing 450 songs, and they each have a particular tool affiliated with them. So I'll give you an example here. So this song right here, this might be a little too much for a lot of people, but this song, Satisfaction, right? First of all, it's edgy. So if I put that on and I'm like, okay, everyone, we're gonna do some squats and jumping jacks, and we're gonna do some aerobic exercise. We're gonna imagine that we're at the aerobic championship of America, and I put that song. I put on that song, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna elevate our heart rate. So the point is, it's a very intentional process of collecting music and imagining what connotation that music has, and what does that song lessen the risk for participants to do. And so if I were to choose another song, Disco Inferno, right? Sing along. So Disco Inferno is like, okay, well let's do some like disco moves here. And that song, of course, I was raised, this is very westernized music, and I want to acknowledge that I'm so ignorant in terms of the diversity of music out there. But over time, I found that particular songs, and I want to emphasize this. I have one playlist, it's called Universal Sing-Alongs. Universal Sing-Alongs. And in that playlist, there are songs where people come alive. They sing to the top of their lungs. Again, mostly in westernized countries, but also works in Mexico and over in Europe. These songs, they're so familiar and nostalgic for people, and they know the lyrics, so they feel a sense of familiarity and they know what to do. I mean, when people know what to do, like a line dance, they know what to do, then it really lessens the risk. And so this is why it's so important when we're taking these risks as facilitators, we got to eradicate all uncertainty as to what people are supposed to do, right? And then when people have those clear directions, and this is coming back to the question of like, is our facilitator persona a commander or a facilitator? Like a facilitator ideally is behind the scenes and, they're using the mic probably 5% of the time. The facilitator is taking up the least amount of space, ideally, right? And then there's kind of more so the commander facilitator who's like, I'm taking the spotlight, follow my lead, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And what that can do is that can also reduce the uncertainty. And there's different styles of reducing the uncertainty. But that's how I choose my music. So it's been a lot of experimentation. And again, there's these universal songs that induce these memories and these emotions for people. And they just work again and again and again.
Yes, and then playing with it. Instead of commander, maybe instructor would sound nicer, where you give instructions that are easy to follow and nobody or very few would think, don't tell me what to do. Because I think amongst adults, we don't like to be taught what to do.
I'm so curious. Are there circumstances where you will push your participants and embrace more of this persona of being a commander? Because I don't really like that word, and I'm using it because I want to go to the extreme. Like sometimes being a commander, people, it eradicates uncertainty and people are like, okay, that's what I must do. Okay, I'm fully on board.
Yeah.
And this has worked for me when I set up my speaker, put on my microphone in a public square somewhere, and I'm like, all right, everybody, we're going to join hands now. Okay. And everybody clap your hands just like that. Like there's this authoritative energy for a lot of people. It's totally way too much and pushy. And then sometimes it works. So, yeah.
Yeah. What is your number one facilitation challenge?
I really think that it's So once people have done the first few steps and they've jumped up and down and they're standing up and their energy is elevated, then it's like it's just seamless. It's seamless. Like every human can follow this step-by-step process to aliveness once that physical energy is elevated and the group is moving and the music is going. But for me, it's like it's the very beginning. And oftentimes it's just having people show up fully. It's before all the exercises. It's how to create this state of confidence in what we're going to do, such that the person says to themselves, like, this is going to make me feel incredible. I'm going to fully participate because I know that this is important. So it's like really beforehand. I'm curious, do you relate with this?
Absolutely. And it circles back to what you said beforehand, to be intentional with your invitation. So to invite them instead of forcing them, to make it easy and safe. And I think you also mentioned that it has a lot to do with the energy that you're bringing into the room, so that you are showing up and being present first, so that it becomes easier for the others to join.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize the invitation and how I've developed since our first podcast episode. Back then, it was just, I have all these tools and yay, fun, joy. And now it's much more about the design of an entire experience. What happens before the experience? How does one open an event or conference? What happens in between speakers? What happens in the intermissions? How do we close an experience to create this sense of heartfulness, this sense of true feeling and vulnerability? And then finally, how do we create these environments where organic, meaningful connections just organically happen? We don't have to facilitate. We don't have to be there. We don't have to guide the group. How can we catalyze meaningfulness across the entire event when people are just mingling, right? And how do we get people to show up fully? And that's the greatest predictor of the success of our workshop, is how much do our participants trust us? Trust that this is worth their time and this is a rare opportunity and this is going to benefit their life professionally and personally. And sharing that, I lead a workshop where I talk about the research behind human connection, and I share some of these methods, these new methods for creating connection that I don't often see at events. And at the very beginning of the workshop, I share people the research on happiness and health. And I show that the quality of our human connections is so much more powerful in terms of preventing disease and promoting well-being than these other factors that they're very top of mind, like there's cigarettes, there's obesity, there's these other health risks, right? And so I really emphasize at the beginning, like, we're not just learning this for our professional lives. This is something we can bring into our personal lives when we quit this job. Maybe we don't like this job. Well, who cares about this workshop? This is just a professional development workshop so that I can work at this job, that I work for a boss that I don't like. So that is so crucial. Presenting both the emotional argument and the logical argument for people to be fully bought in. And share with me, Miriam, like, how do you approach this question of having participants so excited and eager to participate, to learn? How do you approach that?
Good question. I think by sparking curiosity and triggering a sense of urgency. I think I recently hosted a workshop about engaging meetings. And very early, I mentioned that, okay, we're here to learn how to have more engaging meetings. So I expect you to be engaged and to turn all the other tabs off and to really participate in that. Because if you're not engaged, don't believe that you can create engagement for others. And so this was very instructional, commander facilitation style. And it worked, just to address their consciousness and to say, okay, if you're spending time here now, you can either waste the next 90 minutes by trying to multitask, and then you don't learn anything from this workshop, but also you maybe your emails that you're trying to send in the same time don't make sense. But if you really want to change the way you host and design meetings, then maybe these 90 minutes are good invested time. And it was a beautiful workshop. And funny enough, it was a similar group that I hosted a workshop format that I call Falling in Love on Zoom for afterwards. And Falling in Love on Zoom, I've done it 3 times and it was 3 times successful. The participants really were highly engaged, almost fell in love with each other. And the 4th time it didn't work. And I think it was because of the lacking sense of urgency. So why should we do that? Why? I somehow failed to create this trust that A, there's something to learn, and B, they can trust me to just lean in and jump into this first breakout room with someone they don't know.
Was it with a different group? Like, did they have a different stage of familiarity with you as a facilitator? Or
I think most of them did not know me as a facilitator. And still the other groups beforehand didn't either.
Yeah. I mean... 2 things are coming to mind. The first is the more that our participants know us, it's not about the logical reasons or the emotional reasons for why the content's important. It's like, do they like us? Do they feel, I'm happy to be in this person's presence, right? That's such an important factor in people fully showing up. And then the other piece here, and this is related to some of the insights during this meditation retreat, is how things evolve. There's this law of impermanence. Like, some things may be successful for a few sessions and then they'll change. And the less we're attached to that success, and the more that we anticipate that eventually we're going to get rejected, or eventually we're going to fail, or eventually people aren't going to like our workshop, then we're going to be more at peace and we're going to suffer less when it happens. And so when this happens, go on.
And the less we're attached, the less we'll judge them, because I think this is at the centerpiece. When I'm attached to the outcomes and I want this session to be inspiring or engaging, then I'm putting a lot of pressure not only on myself, but also on the participants. So if they are not playing along, I will judge them unconsciously or consciously. And they will sense that.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing in that is there's this kind of self-blame, and then there's this also blaming the participants, when really it's like, this is so multi-causal. People are arriving into our Zoom room with a very complex array of memories and experiences. Maybe someone slipped and dropped their coffee this morning. So I'll be vulnerable. When people say I'm judgmental, it breaks my heart. Like, it really hurts me. Like, that's my Achilles heel. Because I've lost jobs for being judgmental. I've lost friends. Some people used to describe me as a psychopath. Like, I had low emotional empathy, and this is years ago. And so I'm really interested in avoiding that. Like, I do not want, and this comes back to what I was sharing in the beginning, is how do we have these meaningful, deep, nourishing experiences with any human we encounter, such that we're leaving with more energy, with a sense of excitement for connecting with random people in the world? If we project this sense of judgment on others and they feel like we're evaluating them and that they're not good enough for our presence, it's just the exact opposite of psychological safety. And so when we're in that situation, when our participants are not buying in, they're not showing up fully, there's something that isn't working. If we start to, and this is another quote that I want to share. I am responsible for all my suffering in this world. I am responsible for the suffering in my life. This is one of the fundamental affirmations of Buddhism. And so if we take that to heart, and when we're in a workshop, we really put it on ourselves instead of judging our participants, then I think it's going to empower us to adjust in the moment.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with the judgment. Yeah, I guess and that's so interesting when I think the way you show up, there is no room for judgment. Because if you're not afraid of making, air quotes, a fool of yourself, because if you're the silliest person in the room, others will find it easier to be silly and follow, then I think there cannot be any judgment. Unless it's judgment for not going there, judgment for those who stay, who don't turn on their cameras and who don't play along. But then, since in the beginning you're inviting them to do that.
This is where it gets interesting, because we talked about positive effects of social pressure. Now the question arises, if people feel judged for checking their emails during their meeting, is that a positive thing? They feel social pressure to shut down all their tabs and to participate. And then guess what? They feel that social pressure and that judgment. So they stand up and they start stretching. And then they're like, whoa, like this is fun. Like we're all doing this together. Like, oh, I feel a shift. I feel a shift in my mood. Oh my God, this song, oh my gosh, everyone's smiling now. Wow, I'm so happy that I felt judged.
Yeah. Did it ever happen to you that a group did not play along? So that you would do your opening, you invited them, and you realized that this shift, this switch that we talked about, did not happen?
So you asked me this question about rejection and how it's been hard to re-enter the world because my life is filled with rejection, because I take a lot of risks and I reach out to a lot of people and I make a lot of invitations. So the more invitations that we make, and the more invitations we make that are edgy invitations, the more we're going to get rejected. So my philosophy is like rejection to me is like this signal that I'm out of my comfort zone and that I'm taking risks myself and that I'm not being a hypocrite. Because being a hypocritical party scientist is telling everyone to take social risks and then just staying in the safe zone and never failing and just like never screwing up and just doing the same thing over and over again that I know that works, right? That's hypocritical. And what I've reflected on, Miriam, so I'll share something that may alarm your listeners. So if you're a facilitator and you're more of a facilitator than a commander, then this may alarm you. But I've done this a few times, very with awareness and with care and with benevolence. But my friend and I, we're trying to self-actualize as facilitators. And so sometimes we'll jump in our car and we'll drive around this really wealthy neighborhood and we will find a party. We will find a party that's happening and we will knock on their door. We're dressed up. We have our speaker and we say, hey, we're here to party crash. We're professionals, certified party crash. So we're ready to go. Let's do this. And they're like, yeah, come on in. And so we walk on in, we have the mic, we go, pardon the interruption, everybody, I'm going to need you to lower your voices right now. We got a certified party crash of this event. We heard that there was a little too much joy. We needed to shut it down, like a little bit too much. much. Everyone's laughing and being like, who the hell are these people? And then we get everyone in a huddle. We put on some music that relaxes the environment. And within 10 minutes, people are on their knees singing, and they're holding people in the air. And these are people that are dressed so fancy, so formally. There's one time we did it, and I think this was too crazy, and I judge myself for doing this, but this was like still during COVID. It was an outdoor event, but during COVID, that's crazy. That's so intrusive. So, I'm not that version. But anyway, we did it very safely, very benevolently. We arrived, and it was someone's birthday, and we gave them the mic at the end, and they said slowly and stutteringly, "This is the best night of my life." And so the reason why I'm sharing these stories with you is because I haven't failed a lot. I haven't failed a lot in facilitation. I've had hiccups, but I've never truly failed. I mean, I've failed in that I've led an experience and haven't gotten hundreds of referrals. Like, that's upsetting. Like, why is it that people give me these raving reviews but don't, refer the workshop I'm leading? So maybe that's a failure. But when I think of like being stonewalled by participants, I want to manifest that. Has that happened to you?
It's fascinating. Yes, it has happened to me.
You're more evolved than me.
It has happened to me that this past workshop, falling in love on Zoom, I thought that it's a proven concept. I can run it. It's bulletproof. And then it wasn't. So I congratulate you for having never failed. And I find this very interesting. How come, or what is it? And I think that's, what is it that we know that it's good for us and still it feels uncomfortable and we might want to avoid it, or we don't refer it? Because it still feels unsafe. So I know that everyone who was at the closing party of the festival, of the NDB festival, loved it. I'm sure that it will still be difficult because we are closing the year together, right? I still believe that some will bail out and say, I don't have time, and find excuses not to join, although they know how much they have enjoyed the previous one.
Immediately, we've been conditioned to not reward this form of human connection. Like, I believe that I've been conditioned to see this play and this fun and joy. That's just a waste of time. Like, get to work and work on your achievements and make money and get status. Like, so that's, I also think that people have a hard time seeing people who are not edgy and open-minded embracing this. People have a hard time seeing how this would transfer to a normal group of people or just a less energetic group of people. And because, when we remember an experience of aliveness, we remember like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. I was having a kung fu battle and then I hugged someone for like 20 seconds. Like, oh yeah, I couldn't see that. But then they forget the part that came at the beginning, which was like 20 minutes of preparation so that people were willing to take more and more risks with one another. But yeah, honestly, Miriam, I'm at a stage in my facilitation business where I'm a little disheartened because I get all this positive feedback, but I'm not yet a referral business. So when I think of this, that's a failure. Like, my experience should be so good and so versatile that everyone will be like, oh my gosh, we need this at my conservative grandma's, elderly home. Like, right? We need this at the law firms. Like, yeah. I got rejected once by a law firm. They thought it was too much.
Yeah, tell us about your rejections. So what does rejection mean, and how do you get them? How do you collect them, and what have you learned?
Yeah. So people don't have time to learn about what they're rejecting. So people reject things that they just have assumptions about. So that's the first thing. When people reject the party scientist, they reject their idea of the party scientist. They don't reject me. Like, I'm so confident that if I had 20 minutes with pretty much any individual, that they would feel so grateful that I spent time with them. I'm confident of that. The rejections I receive are just people who are super busy and who don't have time for anything, because almost every human in a 9 to 5 job right now is just like drowning in overwhelm and overwork. And that's what I've experienced doing this like business development push, is people are inundated and they don't have time. They don't have time for some guy called the party scientist. They don't have time for pretty much anyone. I'm sure they're rejecting everyone, right? But yeah, so to summarize, I get hung up on sometimes, and I don't take it personally. So when I get hung up on, I laugh. I laugh. Like, I laugh because, gosh, I don't think it's logical. I just think it's like, this is a part of it. Like, this is life. Life is not winning all the time. Life is the law of impermanence. I'm going to have a really meaningful call with someone who's going to ask me questions, and then someone's just going to hang up on me. And that's what life is. And, we don't accept this about life. We don't accept that it's just like, it's filled with negativity and misery. And like, if we're taking more risks, we're going to become more mentally resilient to all of this, all these cycles of wins and losses and rejections and acceptances.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I found this very inspiring. And I like what you said. It really resonates that they're not rejecting you, but their assumptions about you. And I think that's a very important distinction, because indeed, very often we reject what we think, we believe, that doesn't fit into the box, that doesn't fit into our worldviews. So if you...
Can I ask you?
Yes.
In your life, have you developed tools for bouncing back after rejection or after being excluded?
Good one. I think, yeah, funny enough, for me, it was Vipassana. So also the silent meditation retreats have taught me that it shall pass. So this feeling of rejection, the sadness, the loss of confidence for that moment will pass, and then to sit with it and to trust that it's just a moment and that's not me, I think is the best help. Previously, I would have just looked for distraction, I think, either in work or in party or in alcohol, these kind of things. And now sitting with the feeling, I think it's the healthiest way. Or running. I run it off.
Yeah. I love this so much that I have a funky chicken in my hand, and sometimes I use it to just really celebrate what was shared. I love this so much. And our sensory experience, right? Like this feeling of anxiety or depression or anger or self-judgment, like we label it that way, but really what we're experiencing is we're just experiencing something in our bodies, right? It's a collection of thoughts and sensations on our bodies, and that's what's being experienced, and that is always changing. Thoughts fly in and out of our head so quickly, and a feeling of excitement will fly through our body, and a feeling of I need to change careers. Oh my God, like I'm being rejected. Like I need to change my name. I can't be the party scientist. People think I'm dealing drugs. Like, like that will pass through my body as well. So Miriam shared with me that she has this symbol featuring the three aspects of this teaching, of what they teach at Vipassana, which is secular meditation retreat. And, at the essence of this philosophy is that our body, it's an array of complex sensations, and the mind interprets these sensations and labels them as emotions and makes problems out of them. And that's what leads to misery. So, well said, philosopher. I'm glad that it stayed with you.
And it's time to go back. I think my last retreat was just before the pandemic. So it's time to refresh.
How have you applied some of that philosophy as a facilitator? So Buddhism, or whatever that means to you.
Good question. I think it has taught me, this sounds silly because it's not surprising that you will learn silence in a silent meditation retreat. But I think sitting with silence and sharing silence with participants, it's definitely one way how I do apply the teachings in a very tangible way, because stuff emerges in silence. And second is I learned that all the answers are inside already. So I think the Vipassana experience, and I went back 4 times. Yeah. I sat 3 times and I've served 1 time. And what it has, every time I learned that being deprived of any input from outside, I find answers inside. And if I can find answers inside, then everyone can do that. So as a facilitator, it's my job to create the environment, the ecosystem, the atmosphere for the groups and individuals to find answers inside. Maybe it was less silence and in fewer days.
So I want to echo all of this and share an experience I had. I was leading a little activation at my friend's birthday party, and it's quite a open-minded crowd, and I got everyone in a huddle. So there's about 40 of us in a huddle, and I just had everybody come to a state of silence, and I put on a nice song, and I said, hey, just look around at the people in this huddle and send someone a smile and just see them. Welcome them here. Welcome them here with your eyes, with a smile. And people were uncomfortable. They couldn't shut up.
Yeah.
And then the other principle here, right? Inner intelligence. I'm contrasting that with collective intelligence. And I love that you're bringing this up, because as facilitators, we're not only creating collective intelligence, we're unlocking inner intelligence, individual intelligence. And I'm going to start using that as a term. I use collective intelligence so often, but you're so right. And one practice that's been really useful for me to unlock and notice this inner intelligence is morning pages. And that was popularized by The Artist's Way, which is a book about creativity. And it's essentially stream of consciousness writing. So whatever comes to mind, you just write it down, never unfiltered. Whatever comes to mind, you don't even have to make grammatical sense. And I find that, holy crap, it's a magical practice. Yeah. So many insights.
It is quite stunning. I agree. I've done that for a while. I've stopped. And it's really good. And I like to do this, although usually I write with the pen on paper. But for this stream of consciousness writing, the morning pages, I love to type because it's fast and I really don't think. So the connection between my hand and what I'm writing and my brain is kind of shut off.
Yeah, I've had the same thought. So I switched to voice dictation. So I just say things.
This, for instance, I cannot do. I feel too self-conscious. I cannot speak to myself.
Oh, I've been speaking in third person to myself for like 4 years. So yeah. So yeah, people think I'm crazy if they see me on my morning walks.
Love that. Thank you. I think it's very healthy, actually, if you can do that. Maybe not in public, but I think in general, to be able to speak to yourself, to voice ideas is very healthy. If someone would like to dare to experiment with it and to create a sense of belonging, uplift the mood of their team, maybe a lawyer, how long does it take? So how long are your sessions?
So right now, I'm trying to develop a method that only takes 5 minutes. But if you really want to get to that state of aliveness, I'd say 30 minutes.
30 minutes. Cool.
There's 2 states, right? I mean, for aliveness, it takes longer, right? Because there's more social risks that need to be taken for people to liberate from self-consciousness. But with just a state of elevated energy and positive emotion, I mean, that's the whole point of these start of week connection energizers, is finding a way to condense it as much as possible into 6 minutes, right?
Yes. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, because you are starting now. So we're December 2022. You're just started a weekly 10 minutes drop-in experimental session. So we'll put the link in the show notes for those who want that first-hand experience and that judge for themselves.
Yep, every week. I think we have one on Christmas Boxing Day, 9 a.m. So I expect everyone listening to be there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We've been speaking for almost 1.5 hours. Is there something that you wanted to share, but we haven't touched upon yet?
Yeah. So what was coming up for me during this Vipassana retreat was this inability to follow rules. So one aspect of the party scientist is health optimization. So I'm a biohacker. I'm really interested in having the most energy ever, physical energy and nutrition and exercise. So I was like running off the site. You're not supposed to leave the center. And I was running off the site and doing sprints by the neighbors' houses. And then at one point I was afraid that I was going to get kicked out because I was like breaking some of the rules. And I realized, oh, my first sit, my first Vipassana experience, I felt like I was going to get kicked out too. And I've been kicked out. I've been kicked out of groups and companies before in my life because I've broken the rules. And so I want to emphasize that, like, when we're embracing the future of facilitation and we're changing social norms and we're breaking social conventions, there is a 100% chance of eventual exclusion, ostracization, or being kicked out. And this is one of the short-term harms of living life super courageously. And I've accepted this about myself, that I am going to break some. I actually stopped breaking the rules after speaking to the assistant teacher, and I understood the rules, but I still did a workout. And so I still broke the rules. The point is,
I would secretly do push-ups during my Vipassana retreat, and I got the warnings. Yes.
So the point is that creativity and breaking rules and experimentation and social risk-taking are under the same character trait, which is courage. And there are times where you may be kicked out, you may be excluded. And I've come to terms with that and have accepted that. And I think it's worth the risk, because the long-term rewards of living a courageous life, the long-term rewards are having meaningful connections that celebrate you, hosting gatherings and being at gatherings where people fully take off their masks and fully lighten up and fully embrace authenticity and none of this competitiveness, like I need to look better than him and who's dressed more nicely. And just living a progressively better life. Like that is the essence of experimentation. I just want to live a better life every day. And so I think it's worth the risk. And I invite everyone to take the risk and get kicked out of many social groups.
Thank you, Jacques. Thank you for, the healthy provocation and to bring lightness and joy to the space. I think there's so much to learn. And yes, not everyone might want to follow your extreme. And I think it's in the extremes that we learn the most. So thank you for going there for us.
And I can't wait to go to the extreme at our end of year, New Year's celebration and reflection.
Yay. Looking forward. Thanks, Jacques. Thank you for staying tuned and for listening to the show. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate that you're sharing your two most valuable resources with me and my guest, your time and your attention. If you're looking for more conversation with other facilitators and for a community of practice, why don't you join Never Done Before, the community that I have built, and many of my podcast guests are already members. Visit neverdonebefore.org, and I wish to see you there.